Hello, everybody. It is I, Mr. Aaron, returning once again for a brand new adventure that we will be beginning today. Now, this adventure takes place someplace very cold. But believe it or not, it's not Wyoming. It's not Alaska. It's not even the North Pole. It is outer space. Can you guess what book it is? It's Stanley in Space. Now, this is Stanley from the Flat Stanley books, but it turns out this book actually takes place after Flat Stanley has rounded back out again. So, it's Flat Stanley when he's no longer flat anymore. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Will you meet with us? Does anyone hear? From the great farness of space, from farther than any planet or star that has ever been mentioned, in books the questions came, again and again. Will you meet with us? Does anyone hear? Chapter 1. The Call. It was Saturday morning, and Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were putting up wallpaper in the kitchen. "Isn't this nice, George?" said Mrs. Lambchop, stirring paste. "No excitement. A perfectly usual day." Mr. Lambchop knew just what she meant. Excitement was often troublesome. The flatness of their son Stanley, for example, after his big bulletin board settled on him overnight. Exciting, but worrying too, until Stanley got round again. And that genie visiting to grant wishes? Oh, very exciting! But all the wishes had to be unwished before the genie returned to the lamp from which he sprung. "Yes, dear," Mr. Lambchop smoothed down some wallpaper. "Ordinary. The very best sort of day." In the living room, Stanley Lambchop and his younger brother Arthur were watching a Tom Toad cartoon on TV. The sporty toad was water skiing and fell off, making a great splash. Arthur laughed so hard he didn't hear the telephone, but Stanley answered it. "Lambchop residence," said the caller. "President of the United States speaking. Who's this?" Stanley smiled. "The King of France." "They don't have kings in France. Not anymore." Excuse me, but I'm too busy for jokes." Stanley kept his eyes on the TV. "My brother and I are watching the Tom Toad Show." "Well, you keep watching, young fella." The caller hung up just as Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop came in to watch the rest of the show. "Hey, guess what?" Stanley said. "Hay is for horses," said Mrs. Lambchop, mindful always of careful speech. "Who called, dear?" Stanley laughed. "The President of the United States." Arthur laughed too. "Stanley said he was the King of France." Tom Toad suddenly vanished from the TV screen and an American flag appeared. "We bring you a special message from the White House in Washington, D.C., said the deep voice of the announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States!" The screen showed the President, looking very serious behind his desk. "My fellow Americans," the President said, "I'm sorry to interrupt this program, but someone out there doesn't realize that I am a very busy man who can't waste time joking on the telephone. I hope the particular person I am talking to, and I do not mean the King of France, will remember that. Thank you. Now here's that Tom Toad show." Tom Toad, still water skiing, came back on the TV. "Stanley!" Mrs. Lambchop exclaimed. "The King of France, indeed." "Gosh!" Arthur said. "Will Stanley get put in jail?" "Oh, there's no law against being a telephone smarty," Mr. Lambchop said. "Perhaps there should be." The telephone rang and he answered it. "George Lambchop here." "Good." It was the President. "I've been trying to get a hold of you." "Oh, my," Mr. Lambchop said. "Oh, please excuse. Hold on. Now, you're the fella has the boy was flat once, got his picture in the newspaper?" My son Stanley, Mr. President, Mr. Lambchop said, to let the others know who was calling. I had to be sure, said the president. We have to get together, Lambchop. I'll send my private plane right now, fetch y'all here to Washington, D.C. Mr. Lambchop gasped. Private plane? Washington? All of us? The whole family, the president chuckled, including the King of France. Chapter 2. Washington. At the White House, in his famous Oval Office, the president shook hands with the Lambchops. Thanks for coming, he chuckled. Bet you never thought when you woke up this morning you'd get to meet me. Indeed not, Mr. Lambchop said. This is quite a surprise. Well, here's another one, said the president. The reason I asked you to come. He sat down behind his desk. Serious now. Tira. Never heard of it, right? The Lambchops all shook their heads. Nobody ever heard of it. It's a planet up there somewhere. They sent a message, the first ever from outer space. The Lambchops were greatly interested. Imagine, Mrs. Lambchop exclaimed. What did it say? Very friendly tone, the president said. Peaceful, just checking around. Asked us to visit. Now my plan... A side door of the Oval Office opened suddenly to reveal a very nicely dressed lady wearing a crown. Mrs. Lambchop recognized her at once as the Queen of England. About the banquet, also the Queen began, but saw the president was busy. Oops, we beg your pardon, she closed the door. This place is a madhouse, the president said. Visitors, fancy dinners, no end to it. Now, where was... yes, the Star Scout. He leaned forward. That's our new top-secret spaceship, just ready now. Send somebody up on the Star Scout, I thought, to meet with these tyrants. But who? Wouldn't look peaceful to send soldiers, or even scientists. And then I thought... What could be more peaceful than just an ordinary American boy? The president smiled. Why not Stanley Lambchop? Stanley? Mrs. Lambchop gasped. In a spaceship? To meet with an alien race? Oh, boy, said Stanley. Oh, I'd love to go. Me too, said Arthur. It's not fair if... Arthur, Mr. Lambchop drew in a deep breath. Mr. President, why Stanley? It has to be somebody who's already had adventure experience, the president said. Well, my Secret Service showed me a newspaper story about when Stanley was flat and caught 2 robbers. Robbers! Now that's an adventure. I've had them too, Arthur said. A genie taught me to fly, and we had a liaphant, and... A what? A liaphant, Arthur said. Half lion, half elephant. They're nice. Is that right? Well, the Secret Service never... Mr. President, Mrs. Lambchop did not like to interrupt, but her concern was great. Mr. President, she said, this mission, is it safe? My goodness, of course it's safe, the president said. We have taken great care, Mrs. Lambchop. The Star Scout has all the latest scientific equipment, and it has been very carefully tested. First we tried it on automatic pilot, no passengers. It worked perfectly. And even then, ma'am, we were not satisfied. We sent the Star Scout up again, this time with our cleverest trained bird aboard. But hear for yourself. The president spoke into a little box on his desk. Send in Dr. Schwartz, please. A bearded man entered, wearing a white coat and carrying a bird cage with a cloth over it. Bowing, he removed the cloth to reveal a large, brightly colored parrot. Thank you, Herman, the president said. Dr. Schwartz is our top space scientist, he told the Lambchops. And this is Polly, the bird I spoke of. Polly, tell the folks here about your adventure into space. What? Piece of cake, said the parrot. Terrific, loved every minute of it. What? Thank you, Herman, the president said, and Dr. Schwartz carried Polly away. And there's Polly. That was very reassuring, but it is out of the question for Stanley to go alone, Mrs. Lambchop said. However, we were planning a family vacation. Would it be possible, Mr. President, for all of us to go?" "Well, if you don't mind the crowding," the President said, "and skimping on baggage." "Actually, we had in mind the seaside," Mr. Lambchop said, "or a tennis camp. But—" The Queen of England looked in again. "May we ask if—" "Just a minute, for heaven's sake," said the President. "We shall return anon." Looking peeved, the Queen went away. Mr. Lambchop had decided. "Mr. President, the seaside will keep. We will go to Tira, sir." "Wonderful!" The President jumped up. "To the stars, Lambchops! Some training at the Space Center, and you're on your way." Chapter 3. Taking Off. Pardon me. 10, said the voice of Mission Control. The countdown had begun. When it reached 0, Chief Pilot Stanley Lambchop would press the start button, and the Star Scout would blast off for Tira. 9. Strapped into their seats, the Lambchops... Tried to skip a page. No, the Lambchops held their breaths, each thinking very different thoughts. Stanley was wondering if the Tirans would mind that Earth had sent just an ordinary family. Suppose they were big stuck-ups and expected a general or a TV star or even the president. Suppose... 8, said Control, and Stanley fixed his eyes on the panel before him. Mr. Lambchop was thinking that serving one's country was noble, but this was a bit much. How did these things happen? Off to an unknown planet, the entire family? Other families didn't have a sun become flat. Other families didn't find genies in the house. Oh, well. Mr. Lambchop sighed. 7, said Control. Mrs. Lambchop thought that Mr. Lambchop seemed fretful. But why, now that the Star Scout looks so nice? Thanks to her, in fact. They may call it a spaceship, she had said when she first saw it, but where's the space? Just one room? And all gray? Drab, I say. Much of the training at the Space Center, however, was physical, and as Mrs. Lambchop jogged and exercised regularly, she quickly passed all the tests required. In the days that followed, while the others were being made fit, she used her free time to make the Star Scout more like home. Only so much weight was permitted, but she managed a bathroom scale for the shower alcove and a plastic curtain, pretty shades for the portholes, a Venetian blind for the magnifying exploration window, and posters of Mexico and France. There they are, getting ready to blast off. 6, 5, 5, 5, 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3. Mrs. Lambchop made sure her purse was snug beneath her seat. Arthur, by nature lazy, was thinking that he was glad to be done with all the jogging, jumping, climbing ladders, scaling walls. When he was super strong thanks to the genie, it would have been easy. But for just plain Arthur Lambchop, he thought, oof, it was tiring. 2, said Control. Good luck, everybody. 1. Pay attention, dear, Mrs. Lambchop told Stanley. 0, said Control, and Stanley pressed the start button. Rockets roaring, the Star Scout rose from its launching pad. Gaining speed, it soared higher and higher, carrying the Lambchops toward the Farness, where Tira lay. Chapter 4. In Space. I'll just flip this omelet, said Mrs. Lambchop, making breakfast in the Star Scout. And then, oh dear, the omelet hovered like a frisbee in the air above her. Mostly, however, after weeks in space, the Lambchops remembered that gravity, the force that held things down, did not exist beyond Earth's atmosphere. Mr. Lambchop often read now with his hands clasped behind his head, allowing his book to float before him, and Stanley and Arthur greatly enjoyed pushing from their chairs to drift like feathers across the room. Raising her pan, Mrs. Lambchop brought down the omelet. "After breakfast, what?" she said. "A game of Monopoly?" "Please, not again," Arthur sighed. "If I'd known this adventure would be so boring, I'd never have come." "The worst part," said Stanley, "is not knowing how long it'll last." "The beginning wasn't boring," Arthur said as they began their breakfast. "The beginning was fun." The first days had, in fact, been tremendously exciting. They'd spent many hours at the Star Scout's magnifying window watching the bright globe of Earth grow steadily smaller until it seemed at last only a pale marble in the black of space. And there had been many special sights to see: the starry beauty of the Milky Way, the planets, red Mars, giant Jupiter, cloudy Venus, Saturn with its shining rings. The third evening they appeared on TV news broadcasts on Earth. Words of their voyage had been released to the press, and all over the world people were eager to learn how this extraordinary adventure was proceeding. Standing before the spaceship's camera, the Lambchops said they felt fine, looked forward to meeting the Tyrans, and would report nightly while they remained in TV range. The fourth evening they floated before the camera, demonstrating weightlessness. This was greatly appreciated on Earth, and they floated again the following day. By the sixth evening, however, they were hard-pressed to liven their appearances. Mr. Lambchop recited a baseball poem, Casey at the bat. Stanley juggled tennis balls, but the Earth audience, knowing now about weightlessness, saw the balls float when he tossed them up. Arthur did imitations of a rooster, a dog, and a man stuck in a phone booth. After this, while Mrs. Lambchop was singing her college song, he went behind the plastic curtain to undress for a shower and accidentally pulled the curtain down. He was mortified, and she tried later to comfort him. And there they are, showing off for the camera. "We will be remembered, Arthur, for our time in space," she said. "Nobody will care about a curtain." "I'll be remembered forever," Arthur said. 100 million people saw me in my underwear." The next day was Stanley's birthday, and just after dinner the screen lit up. There was the president in his shirt sleeves behind his desk in Washington, D.C. "Well, here I am, working late again," the president said. "It's a tough job, believe me. Happy birthday, Stanley Lambchop. I've arranged a surprise. First, your friends from school." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the clearing of throats, and then, from all the millions of miles away, came the voices of Stanley's classmates singing, "Happy birthday, dear Stanley. Happy birthday to you." Stanley was tremendously pleased. "Thanks, everybody," he said. "You too, Mr. President." "Oh, that was just the USA part," said the president. "Ready over there in London, Queen?" "We are indeed," the Queen's voice said cheerfully. "And now, Master Lambchop, our famous Westminster Boys' Choir." From England, the beautiful voices of the famous choir sang "Happy Birthday, Stanley" all over again, and then other children sang it, from Germany and Spain and France. All this attention to Stanley made Arthur jealous. And when the president said, "By the way, Arthur, you entertained us wonderfully the other night," he was sure this was a tease about his appearance in underwear. But he was wrong. "Those imitations," the president said, "especially the fellow in the phone booth, darn good." And there they are talking to the president. Let's see. And I think we're going to go ahead and end right there for today. So we will be back at 2 tomorrow to continue with Stanley in Space. So thanks for tuning in, guys. And of course, be sure to check out our other live programs we have going on. Be sure to check out Toddler Time with Miss Becky and Stories with Sunny with Miss Sunny. And Don't forget about all of our digital content that we have out there also, Overdrive, Hoopla, RB Digital, all that good stuff that we have available for you from the Sweetwater County Library System. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you tomorrow.